Here is the original 20-year-old timing belt, and you can see if I really bend it, it was just barely starting to get some fatigue marks on it. 150,000 miles, 20 years old. Well, who's hungry? Come here. Sit, sit, sit. Sit, Saturn. I know you smell grease on my hands. Sit, sit. Come on, hardhead. Sit down. Vita, you sit too. Stay. Good dogs. Hey, what's up, Speedy's Garage gang? Welcome back to the Speedy's Garage YouTube channel. We're in Old Faithful today, also known as Project 4Runner, and I'm shocked to say this, but this truck is 20 years old this year, and I'm very surprised that time has gone by that fast. I can remember buying it practically brand new. I didn't buy it new off the lot, but I bought it the same model year it was built, which is 2002, and it only had like 5,000 or 8,000 miles on it, something like that. It was an executive's vehicle that had turned it in from a lease to get something different, and so it had super low miles. Was an SR5 with leather, which was kind of rare, and it's been a fantastic vehicle. I've had it 20 years, and literally the only thing I've done to it besides change the fluids and rotate tires and brakes and normal stuff like that is I had one oxygen sensor fail. I think it was like 70 bucks, and that's it in 20 years of ownership. And so I decided that, you know, for 2022, with it being 20 years old, I need to really start doing some of the maintenance on it that I haven't done. Started when I was kind of under it, crawling around, getting ready to lube everything, and I noticed that telltale star pattern of oil, gear oil, leaking from the rear brake drum. And that's an indication that you've had a rear axle seal fail. And you guys know I do most work on most cars myself. I started looking into what I would need to get to be able to perform that job, and it was going to take a press and some special jigs and things like that. And there are things that I wouldn't have used more than the one time. If I had friends with these trucks, or you know, new people who was in part of a club that had them, I would have bought the tools and done it myself. I called around, and even the local mechanic shops that would do the rear axle seal, to get to the bearing and everything on the wheel, once the oil kind of gets past the seal, it'll wash out the bearing and the wheel bearings. They would send it off to a machine shop to have the little retainers and everything pressed on and off the axle. And so I started calling machine shops and the waiting list, and I mean, it turned into this big headache. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I ended up actually going down to my local Toyota dealer and talking to them about performing the job. And I kind of explained to them, like look, I work on cars quite a bit. I know what it takes. Let's talk really nuts and bolts here about, you know, what it's going to mean. And so we kind of got to talking through it, and I'm like, you're already going for the rear axle seal, which is like a $12 part. You've already pulled the axle out. The brakes are already disassembled. They're coated in gear oil, and it was just the driver's side on mine that had failed. And so I said, let's just do both sides, and I want the retainer put back on with a new axle seal in a specific way. And I kind of drew a diagram of how I wanted that done. There's been an engineering change or something to do with the seal. You can look all this up online. I won't go into a ton of detail about it, but what it boils down to is the little retainer has a bevel on it, and the new seal is offset a little bit, and it'll start to ride on that bevel, and it'll cause the new seal to wear out really quickly. So I asked the technician, I actually got to talk to the technician that was going to do the work, to flip that retainer around, which has pretty much been the fix everyone's kind of going to. He said, yeah, no problem. So long story short, I had Toyota do that work. Well, that was a couple of months ago, and I've recovered from that. It wasn't stupid expensive considering how long I've had the truck, but it wasn't cheap either when you're talking about just going and having something done. So I waited a couple of months, and I decided, you know, I'm going to start going through the truck a little bit. 20 years old, about 150,000 miles on it now, and start doing some of the other things that I haven't done yet. And the other big one was the timing belt. Now, believe it or not, 20-year-old original timing belt. Now, I had been pulling the inspection cover off the front of the engine. I'll show you what that looks like here. It's just a few little, I think, 10mm bolts, and you can remove the radiator spring clip on the upper radiator hose to allow that panel to slide back, and you can get a really good look at the timing belt. And I'll show you a picture of what mine looked like. it still looked like it was in great shape, but I could tell it had just a little bit of slack in it. Not enough to cause me a problem yet, but more than it should have, and I could kind of feel the belt was feeling not as rigid as it probably would new. And so I knew it was getting close. So I started making a list of parts, and there's a lot of things once you're doing the timing belt that you might as well just go ahead and do while you're in there. Water pump, the idler, timing belt idler and tensioner pulleys, the tensioner pulley tensioner. That's something else while you're in there you might as well do, and a coolant flush, and probably the radiator. These, you know, trucks have an Achilles heel where the radiator fluid flows through a mechanism in the base of the radiator that kind of regulates the temperature. It warms it in the winter so that you don't have really cold transmission fluid flowing through the transmission, and it cools it in the summer when it's, you know, 100 degrees outside or whatever. I do have an auxiliary transmission cooler on the truck. I put that on years ago, and that will help the transmission live a much longer, happier life. But I didn't bypass the radiator itself because I feel like the engineers did that for a reason, to kind of help regulate that temperature, so I left it. What can happen is that cooler, or those fins inside the radiator, they're inside of coolant. Those fins can break down and fail over time. You get coolant into the transmission fluid, and then it takes out your transmission. Now you got a great big repair over what amounts to probably like $100, $150 radiator. So while I was doing all the other work, or going to have all the other work done, I went ahead and priced out a radiator. And the parts are interesting. When you get things done at a dealer, they want to build in the warranty on the part into the labor. So you have to be careful with that. And so I basically went down, and they have me set up as a shop in their system. And so I worked it out where I would just buy the parts and I get them wholesale. So I saved a ton of money on the parts, and I bought everything. And then I told the dealer, I said, hey, look, I'll have you guys do the labor if you're fair with me on the price of the work. Like, I can do it myself, but, you know, I'm getting to a point in life where time is valuable to me, and I almost think about things like paying myself per the hour. What would it cost me to do it? And I started thinking, you know, I'm gonna have to give up an entire weekend to do the work. If the dealer will do it for a reasonable price, I'll just drop it off, let them use my parts. They're all Toyota. I used all Toyota parts, and let them perform the labor. And with these trucks sort of becoming classics, I kind of felt like it might help the resale value. Not that I intend to sell it, but having paperwork that says, yeah, Toyota actually did the timing belt, water pump, and all that stuff, I felt like that would go a little bit farther than Joe Blow mechanic, you know, Speedy, doing the work in his shop. So they ended up working out a really good deal with me on the labor. So I decided to drop it off at Toyota and have them do it. Took them a couple of days. I just got it back. It's driving great. I asked them to leave the old parts in the back of the truck so I could actually inspect them. I'm going to show you that now. We can take a look and see how these things did over their 20-year lifespan on the vehicle. And you know, one of the things I love about this truck, it's 20 years old. It's just a car. It's not trying to be an iPhone. It doesn't try to send me texts or read me text messages when they come in. It doesn't try to tell me when I need to turn. It doesn't try to tell me when I'm going off the road. It doesn't do any of those things. It's just a car, and I love it for that. Take a look at the work. You can see the guy did nice, clean. I can open this. And there's the supercharger, glorious. But yeah, new radiator, new upper lower radiator hoses, did those while we were in there. And there's that inspection cover I was talking about that says that 3400 4cam. You can actually pull that off with just a few bolts and see what's going on. And they do put a decal on it now that shows when the timing belt was done. So like I said, I'm hoping that maybe that helps the resale value, knowing it was actually done at Toyota, and it'll kind of be on the official maintenance history for this vehicle. All right, let's see what we're working with here. So here's all the old parts. Radiator, this is the upper hose, I think, white one. Kind of soft. Yeah, it was a good deal. I mean, they probably would have lasted a little while longer, but why? I mean, they were cheap. I think they're like 15 bucks. A little bit soft, so there's that. Belts. Kind of see the ribs, little fatigue, some cracks, but all in all, not super bad, to be honest. You Again, original belts. I'm shocked. 20 years old. You can just barely see they were starting to fatigue with a few cracks, but I'm having to stress it to get to see those. Supercharger belt was not original. I've changed it a couple of times. I wanted to make sure I was always getting max boost. So I have gone through a couple of supercharger belts. And they tend to take a little more abuse than the other drive belts. Doesn't look like it's very cracked, but it was getting a little, you can kind of see it's getting a little worn looking. And it's flimsy. You know, the newer ones are very stiff. So now here's the big guy. This is the timing belt. Get these other ones out of the way. Here is the original 20-year-old timing belt. And you can see, if I really bend it, it was just barely starting to get some fatigue marks in it. 150,000 miles, 20 years old, never been changed. And they say you're supposed to change these every, I think, 90,000 or 6 or 7 years. I can't remember. Somebody will leave me a comment, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But this one went 150,000 in 20 years. So I don't know if your environment matters, like where you store the vehicle. This one's been mostly garage kept. There were a few years where it sat outside before I had the shop built and everything, but honestly, for being 20 years old, other than being just kind of loose, you can see it's not very stiff. So other than that, the belt itself was okay. It definitely needed to be changed though. It was time. Here is the stock tensioner. Beefy. This rubber thing cap, it's a little dried out. It feels a little, doesn't feel pliable. But that's what the tensioner looked like. Could have been reused, but it was one of those things that if you're in there, why not? So there's that. And then the pulleys. So this is the tensioner pulley. You can see where the tensioner was pressing on it. And you can always tell it feels a little gritty, to be honest. So when I'm spinning it, I don't know if you can hear it, but I can feel just the slightest hint of grittiness in the bearing. So that means it wasn't wore out, but it was on its way. See if you can hear that. So it should be really smooth, like fluid, and I can sort of feel some grittiness. So I'm glad I had that replaced. And believe it or not, the dealer did not recommend. They said, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I said, no, you guys are already in there. You know, this is the crazy thing about these pulleys. So this one, the tensioner pulley, and this guy, which is the idler, these pulleys for some reason were crazy expensive from the dealer. And so I was glad to have that wholesale shop type setup, because it made these pulleys a lot cheaper through the dealer. And then I actually didn't get them through the dealer. I actually ordered them from a place online that had factory Toyota parts, and they were even half of what my discounted price was at the dealer. So, and this is the idler pulley, and it is super smooth. Like, this is how I'm gonna try to get this where you can hear it. Probably can't even hear that. So it is super smooth. This one, like I said, the tensioner pulley just a little bit gritty. Just a little bit. So replace both of these, and I think I'm trying to remember my price when I found them online. I think this one was like 40 and this one was like 30. Close to that anyway. They definitely weren't the crazy $150. Like from the dealer, I think this one was like almost $200 for this one pulley, which was nuts. Here's the boxes they came in. So this was the idler. It's an NSK. So it doesn't say Toyota on it, but this is the one Toyota uses. And this one's the Koyo. This was the tensioner. I'll show you this. There's the part number. And now for the water pump. And this kind of tells the tale on how things were going. I wasn't noticing very much coolant loss from the radiator reservoir or the overflow reservoir, but I was noticing a little. And there you can see it was barely leaking. So when you start seeing that red puffy stuff, it's basically leaking a little bit, and then the heat on the block or whatever and evaporation, it was kind of boiling off. So it was time. It was definitely time. But this is the original water pump. You can see the back, what starts to fail is that gasket. You can see around the, kind of around the edge there. It's cracked in a couple of places. So that's kind of the inspection on the parts. I haven't gotten to the radiator yet. We're going to do that one in a minute. But it was time. And the water pump, the fins and everything, it feels fine. Like I don't feel any resistance or anything like that. But again, 20 years, that's enough usage out of this. Time to replace it. For what it costs, it's well worth it, especially if you're going to keep the vehicle for a while. So that's what those parts look like. Oh, almost forgot the thermostat. So this is not the original thermostat. When I put the supercharger on, TRD recommended a 170 degree thermostat. So this is actually about 15 years old. I put this in when I put the supercharger on. And you can't really tell when a thermostat's going bad. It'll just quit working. This one, the spring, everything feels okay. I can tell you the gasket around it feels very brittle. So I went ahead and picked up a new thermostat. The one I picked up came from Napa, and it was a part number. This is the original supercharger thermostat that I put in it. I think it was also a Napa part, but it's been 15 years. I can't remember. But when I went to Napa and got the new one, it's an HM, I think, 17. It's actually a Napa rebranded probably part, but it was an HM. I think it was HM, but it was a 17. You can see there it says 170 degree. And I did confirm on the thermostat it's stamped. It was stamped way down in this hole, 170. So I did confirm that. But that's the thermostat. Now let's look at the radiator. I think I forgot to show you the part number of the tensioner, but there it is as well, if it's helpful for you. That was this dude. All right, unboxing this may be tricky one-handed. We're gonna see how I do. Come on. Oh, there we go. So there. Oh, the tech even put the caps back on it for me. That was nice of him. Looks okay. A lot of times the telltale on these is the tanks. The tops will start turning an off black color. It'll start turning kind of a brown and get brittle. But this one is actually in good shape. Now what I'm curious about, I mentioned, so this is the top. Dirty. Guess it would be after 20 years though. This is the cooler section I was talking about, and I think I accidentally said radiator fluid flows through it, but there's actually radiator, coolant in here, obviously, and it's in this tank. And then inside of this tank, there is also some metal fins that go back and forth, and the transmission fluid actually runs through those. So it comes in here, comes out there, or vice versa. Pretty sure it comes in here and comes out here. But either way, you've got transmission fluid running inside of here. If the fins inside of this part fail, now coolant gets into the transmission fluid, destroys your transmission. They call it the pink milkshake because the transmission fluid is red. It gets diluted down with the radiator or the coolant, and it ruins your transmission. And now you've got pretty expensive repair. So what I'm curious about is if I can take this tank off and actually look at the fins. That's what I'm going to try to do next. All right, so all I did, don't want to bore you with it, took a flat blade screwdriver and I just pried back all the little prongs that went all the way around the perimeter of that tank. I'm not sure if there's something connected to these or if it's just all going to come off together. I guess it's going to come off together. But there's our tank. So that is what the transmission fluid passes through to kind of regulate the temperature. And mine appears to be in pretty good shape. It's one of those things you don't know until you know. And let's see, what is that? Maybe a little bit of corrosion on the very end down here. This 4Runner has not seen a ton of, salty roads. So that has helped. These barbs look like they're in good shape. So actually that radiator may have been able to go a while longer. But again, 20 years old, and I went and looked, it was 130 bucks. That's what I paid for the brand new one. It's a factory Denso. Cheap insurance. There's the part number for the radiator, and I'll try to leave links in the description below for all the parts that I picked up to get this done. And the radiator, believe it or not, was actually a little tricky to get. I would find it online and try to order it, and the places would cancel my order and said that they only allow local pickup. So these getting damaged in shipping is apparently a big problem. So luckily, the local dealer parts department worked it out with me, and I was able to get it for like 130 bucks, and it came perfect. The box wasn't damaged or anything, so I had good luck there, but your mileage may vary. So that's it. Old Faithful, otherwise known as Project Sport Runner, is good to go on the timing belt. It's got a new water pump, new upper and lower radiator hoses, a new radiator, all the pulleys are changed over, fresh coolant. We've now also done the rear axle seals, rear axle bearings, and new brakes on both sides. So those are some major maintenance items that are now taken care of. Next up, I've got the normal for this vehicle, leaking valve cover gaskets. I'm gonna tackle that one myself. I'll probably shoot a little bit of content on that. While I've got the, while I'm working on those valve cover gaskets, I'll probably pull the supercharger off and do some maintenance on it, get that done, and then let me think what is next. A full lube and then a full fluid change. So it'll have a, when it hits 150,000 miles, I'm gonna do front and rear differential fluids, transmission fluid, power steering fluid. Brake fluid was flushed not too long ago, so it's good to go, but everything else is gonna get changed, an oil change and all of that all at once, so that's coming up. So that's it. So the purpose of this video is to kind of make you think sometimes you got to kind of weigh what it costs to have someone do this for you versus doing it yourself. For me, I'm at a point where the weekend and having the weekend was more important to me than what it cost me labor-wise to have the work done. The parts would have cost me the same. So I got the parts under my wholesale rate from the dealer or Amazon or wherever else I found them. I'll leave links again in the description of everything I got. But the parts prices were going to be the same for me no matter what. It was just the labor that was different. Dealer worked out a really good deal with me. Actually let me even use a $100 coupon on the labor, which worked out really well. And so when that price started to kind of tick down, I thought, you know, I'd rather have my weekend than spend my weekend fighting with it, busted knuckles, whatever else might happen, and let them deal with that. So timing belt's done. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Please check us out on Instagram. It's at Speedys_garage, as well as the website www.speedysgarage.net, and hopefully I'll see you out there.